We've covered our fair share of Frozen theories here on Cartoon Conspiracy. From possible cousins to long-lost brothers to, yes, even great-great-grandchildren. I think we know everything we need to know about Anna, Kristoff, Hans, and Elsa's family trees. As for the origin of Elsa's ice powers, we just couldn't let it go. Okay, but seriously, where did Elsa's ice powers come from? Just in case you've been living under a rock for the past 2 years and somehow haven't seen Disney's Frozen, here's the deal. Sisters Anna and Elsa have been estranged from each other for most of their life because Elsa has been hiding her magical ice powers from Anna. Upon Elsa's coronation, these powers take over, and she ends up running away from the entire country she was supposed to govern, leaving them to freeze and starve to death in the eternal winter that she created. Sure, Elsa, go ahead and make your magical ice castle with your pretty little ice dress and your pretty little ice braid. Meanwhile, your subjects are literally freezing to death. It's fine though. Just throw in a singing snowman and a hunky male protagonist with a funny animal sidekick. Add some sassy trolls to make up for that, and you've got the highest grossing animated film of all time. But I'm getting carried away. At the beginning of the film, we meet baby Anna and little Elsa, who is just learning about her ice powers. Everything's going great until she accidentally shoots some ice magic right into her sister's head, almost killing her. But did you ever wonder where Elsa got these powers? We don't get any previous explanation, no prologue, and not even a tragic backstory. There's no mutant powers and there's no radioactive spider, although there are dead parents. So let's piece together some explanation based on what we see in the film. Right after Elsa almost murders her little sister, her parents, the King and Queen of Arendelle, come to the rescue. The king immediately grabs an old book, which we can assume is about the trolls. We see an illustration of a troll with what looks like a king and what appears to be ice coming out of him. They also conveniently have a map that leads them directly to where the trolls are. When they arrive, Pabby, the elder troll, asks if Elsa was born with the powers or cursed, to which the king answers, born. Pabby then explains to them that Elsa can learn to control her powers. Based on the king's book, as well as the troll's knowledge, Elsa's ice powers clearly have some legend behind them. But what could it be? Some speculate that Elsa's powers were inherited from her father, or a distant family member on her father's side, for good reason too. Where did he get that book from? Why did he know exactly where to go to find the trolls? And after Pabby tells him that Elsa must learn to control her powers, why is he the one teaching her? The king gave Elsa gloves to wear as an attempt to cover up her powers. But did you notice he's constantly wearing gloves as well? Yeah, okay, that last one might sound like grasping at straws, but it could really explain why he knew that gloves would work on Elsa's powers. Another explanation for Elsa's powers comes from a much earlier draft of the film. Composers Bobby and Christian Andersen Lopez originally wrote a song intended to be at the beginning of the film called Spring Pageant. But the pageant is all about an ancient troll prophecy, one that would curse their land with eternal winter and grant them a ruler with a frozen heart. And this curse could only be broken with a sword sacrifice. But this idea was from a very different version of this film and was ultimately nixed. So while it's not exactly canon, it does give us some interesting information about the history of Elsa's powers. Going back even further into the story, you may or may not know that Frozen was based off of Hans Christian Andersen's story, The Snow Queen. Frozen endured many revisions. But one of its first versions remained very close to Andersen's tale, meaning Elsa was originally the film's villain, using her ice powers for evil. However, in Andersen's story, the Snow Queen's powers aren't explained either. Another explanation for Elsa's ice powers takes us back even further. Frozen takes place in a fictional Nordic country. Nordic culture is deeply influenced by Norse mythology, which, similar to Greek mythology, tells the legends of gods and deities that represent different elements in our world. Skadi is the closest thing to the goddess of ice and snow. Basically, she's a giant who lives in the mountains, and the cold never bothered her anyway. However, nowhere in her stories does it mention anything about her cursing anybody, bestowing her powers on anybody, or ever really being involved with humans at all. So what do we do now? Where do Elsa's powers come from? There are so many possible explanations for Elsa's magical ice powers. The pageant and the prophecy were cut from the script. The Snow Queen doesn't give us anything, so where do we go now? The source, of course. Director and writer of Frozen, Jennifer Lee, was also asked about the origin of Elsa's powers. She said, "It was an exhausting process coming to the simplicity of her powers. But we had this whole explanation. Like when Saturn is in alignment with such and such, on the 1000th year a child will be born." Lee also described the problem with attempting to explain Elsa's powers in the film. She says, "The more you explained, the more questions you had about magic and the rules. Essentially, less is better than more." So maybe we were never supposed to know about the origin of Elsa's powers because that's not really what the movie is about. I guess that works for some people, but not for me. Technically, I would give the Frozen origin of Elsa's powers conspiracy 0 Olafs out of 5 due to the director's denial of the entire conspiracy. But I want to know what you think. Let us know in the comments. And make sure you stick around to the end of the episode to catch a preview for next week's episode. Subscribe to channel Frederator and I'll see you guys next week. Last year, Cartoon Network aired 2 new shows, Clarence and a mini-series called Over the Garden Wall. Both shows are very different from each other in many ways, from their subject matter to their drastically different art style. However, both Clarence and Over the Garden Wall take place in an unknown, pseudo-modern time. But there's an even bigger connection between these 2 shows, and it comes from these 2 different shots. This one from Clarence, and this one from Over the Garden Wall. Whoa, those are way too similar. Could Clarence and Over the Garden Wall take place in the same town?